Welcome to Bad at Goodbyes. Each week on our show, we spotlight species from the IUCN Critically Endangered Red List. These are plants and animals with decreasing populations, nearing the edges of extinction. We'll share species research, information, and conservation proposals. And then we'll spend a chunk of the show opening a space for contemplation and awe. From a kind of meditative soundscape of gentleness, quietude, and maybe mourning. There's a very low likelihood that any of these species will survive the 21st century. And so perhaps we might acknowledge their passage with a moment of our attention, a recognition of our kinship, and with a commitment to personal and systemic change. Thank you for listening. On today's show, we consider the Vancouver Island Marmot. The Vancouver Island Marmot is a critically endangered mammal native to Western North America, specifically Vancouver Island, in the Canadian province of British Columbia. And it is so cute, so fuzzy. It has a little white snout. Totally charming little fur ball. It is a large rodent belonging to the Suridae family, which includes squirrels, chipmunks, and woodchucks. The Vancouver Island Marmot in adulthood typically reaches a length of about 2 feet from nose to tail. This is like the size of a house cat. Their average weight ranges from 7 to 15 pounds, with their weight peaking just before hibernation in the autumn. They have a rounded body with short, powerful legs. Their forelimbs are strong, equipped with long, curved claws, adapted for digging, for excavating their burrows. The hind limbs are also clawed, though less pronounced. These are adapted for traction and stability when navigating the rocky terrain of their habitat. Their fur is dense, a mix of rich chocolate brown on the back and shoulders, fading to a lighter reddish brown on their sides and underbelly, with a white patch on their snout. The fur is composed of a thick undercoat overlaid with longer guard hairs, and so the undercoat provides warmth and insulation, and the guard hairs help keep their fur relatively dry. They have small, dark brown eyes positioned on both sides of their head, providing them with a wide field of view and able to discern movement at a distance. Their color vision is believed to be limited, Their eyesight is better adapted for the low-light environments of their underground burrows. Their rounded and adorable ears are adept at sensing a range of sounds, including the subtle rustle of a predator approaching or the distant alarm calls of another marmot. Studies suggest they are particularly sensitive to sounds in the higher frequency range, which help them detect airborne predators like eagle or hawk. So they're like tuned in to the sound of wind across feather. The Vancouver Island Marmot's snout is white-furred, and its nose is flat and black with prominent nostrils. Their olfactory sense, that is their sense of smell, is particularly keen. They use scent to mark territory, identify other marmot, to detect the presence of potential mates and potential predators, as well as to find food sources. Marmot have sensitive vibraceae, whiskers, pocking their snout. These are specialized, highly touch-sensitive hairs that aid in navigation through burrows and crevices, and can even detect changes in air currents. Vancouver Island Marmot are herbivores, with dental structure adapted to their plant diet. They have a single large incisor in both the upper and lower jaws, so kind of like a beaver. These chisel-like teeth grow continuously throughout the marmot's life as the teeth are worn down from gnawing through tough vegetation. And then further back in their mouth, their molars have broad, flat surfaces adapted for grinding and crushing plant matter. Vancouver Island Marmot are diurnal, meaning they are most active during the day and generally sleep at night. They typically forage for food in the early morning and the late afternoon, early evening. They have a widely varied diet based on season and plant species availability. They are known to eat over 40 different kinds of grasses, herbs, and wildflowers. When available, they prefer flowers, fruits, and fresh buds, and the fiddleheads of the bracken fern. I just want to pause a moment and highlight this. Marmot eat flowers. And so like you don't have to do this right now, but maybe when you're like having a rough day, image search marmots eating flowers. I think it'll help. So again, their diet is seasonal. In the spring, they primarily eat grasses, like oatgrass, woodrush, and sedge. And then in the summer, their diet consists of meadow-rue, cow parsnip, woolly sunflower, broadleaf lupine, and pea vine. And then in the early fall, they focus on consuming high-calorie foods, actively seeking energy-rich plant parts like seeds and fruits, in order to build up their fat reserves for hibernation. The Vancouver Island Marmot hibernates on average for 210 days of the year. That's a lot. Like 7 months of the year, Little Fuzz is sleeping it off. Compare that to bear, for example, who hibernate about 4 months, and other marmot species generally hibernate about 5 months. And so the Vancouver Island Marmot's 7-month hibernation is long. And so what does that look like? Hibernation is a survival adaptation to endure winter when food is scarce and temperatures drop. It is a physiological state of reduced metabolic activity, so like slowing digestion and waste production, slowing heart rate and breathing, and lowering body temperature. This slowing of the metabolic processes enables the marmot to conserve energy and survive on stored fat reserves. So in October, as the days shorten and temperatures drop, marmot retreat to their burrows. They close up the entrances with soil and vegetation, creating an insulated, like a sealed and insulated underground chamber. And then during hibernation, their body temperature drops dramatically, hovering just above freezing. Their heart rate slows to a few beats per minute, and their breathing becomes shallow and infrequent. And so over the winter, they remain in this state for weeks at a time, punctuated by very brief periods of wakefulness where they may like shift positions or expunge waste. And then as spring approaches and outdoor temperatures rise, the marmot emerge from their burrows and their metabolism gradually returns to normal function. And then they again begin the cycle of spending the warm months building up internal fat reserves to weather the following winter's hibernation, during which they rely entirely on those reserves for sustenance. This is, as you might imagine, a vital adaptation to their specific habitat. The Vancouver Island Marmot is native to Vancouver Island, located off the west coast of British Columbia in Canada. Their habitat lies within the Vancouver Island Ranges. This is a mountainous region that stretches along Vancouver Island Center, and the bioregion is called the Coastal Western Hemlock Zone. The Vancouver Island Marmot live in high-altitude meadows in the subalpine and alpine zones of these mountains at roughly 3,000 to 4,000 feet above sea level. Subalpine and alpine refers to the tree line. This is the ecological zone above which trees cannot grow due to harsh environmental conditions. And so subalpine is below the tree line, and it has trees. Alpine is above the tree line, so no trees. The marmot's habitat is kind of at the margin of the subalpine and alpine zones. These meadow habitats are often south or west facing. They get high sun exposure, which is critical for early snowmelt and the early new growth of the vegetation that the marmot feed on. I should have mentioned this earlier, but the marmot emerged from hibernation hungry, like super hungry. And so timing here is critical. Needing to leave hibernation into a landscape that is generally clear of snow, and in which new plant growth, their food source, has already begun. The winters here are cool and wet, with snowfall exceeding 80 inches. So like 6.5 to 7 feet of snow. And the temperatures regularly dip below 0 Fahrenheit. Summer is mild and relatively dry, with temperatures reaching into the upper 70s. And the flora responds. Soil is like damp with snowmelt, and these few months of warm temperatures. Summer is a landscape of rolling rocky meadows interspersed with vibrant color patches of wildflowers blooming, and like all of it backdropped by these ragged peaks clothed in mist and lush green forest. And into the living soil of their meadow habitat, the Vancouver Island Marmot digs. Their homes are extensive burrow systems, dug deep to serve as shelter from predators, a refuge during hibernation, and as a haven for raising young. Typical burrow system will have multiple entrances, interconnecting tunnels, and internal chambers for sleep, birthing, and social interaction. Marmots share their burrows. It is a communal living space for family groups or colonies, and they're reused year over year. Scientists have observed several burrow systems that have been occupied for over 30 years by generations of the same family group or colonies. A family group typically consists of a single adult male, 1 or 2 adult females, and their offspring. And then colonies are generally made up of 2 to 3 of these family units. Within a colony, social hierarchy is established through displays of dominance like lunging, chasing, and tail raising. And Vancouver Island Marmot can be territorial, and they use their scent glands to mark their boundaries. Scientists have also observed socially cohesive behaviors, like nose touching. They bop one another's noses like as a greeting. They groom one another. And we've observed like play fighting and chase games among juveniles. The Vancouver Island Marmot also exhibits what's called sentinel behavior. So this is where one or a few individuals will position themselves in a location with a good vantage point and scan the surroundings for predators. In the case of the Vancouver Island Marmot, this is cougar, gray wolf, and golden eagle. And then if a threat is detected, the sentinel will sound an alarm call, alerting the rest of the colony to return to the safety of the burrow. The alarm call of the Vancouver Island Marmot is a very loud, high-pitched whistle. Researchers have documented 5 distinct whistles or trills that seem to be used by the marmot for different purposes. Vancouver Island Marmot have a monogamous mating system, and pairings will last over multiple breeding seasons. Though males have occasionally been recorded siring more than one litter in a single breeding season, with different females. Because mating occurs within their burrows, we have limited knowledge of specific mating behavior. We do know that mating generally occurs once a year in the early spring after hibernation. And then gestation lasts about a month, and the female gives birth, this is in the burrow, to litters of generally 3 to 4 pups, who are then nursed for about a month and then emerge from the burrow in the early summertime. These juveniles reach reproductive maturity at about 3 years old, at which point the young males will leave the colony, often traveling 10, 20, 30 miles to establish new families and colonies on their own new territory. In the dream, I too know winter rest. In the dream, I know the sweet kiss of the son of night, kin of death. And the snow falls. And the light wanes. And the breath slows. And I am safe in the dream. Safe among my kin, blood, and chosen. Safe enough to sleep and trust the springtime's promise. In the dream. Historically, habitat loss due to overlogging and forest clear-cutting, and then the resultant overabundance of predators, drove the Vancouver Island Marmot to the very brink of extinction. And so this overlogging, this human resource overuse, reshapes the habitat in ways that temporarily favor predator species who then decimate the marmot population. But then with a reduced prey population, the predator species is then threatened by lack of available food. And so an ecosystem that was slowly balanced over time is subjected to rapid, untenable, and unsustainable fluctuation due to human intrusion. Relatedly, human-induced climate change poses a forthcoming threat. As mentioned earlier, the annual hibernation cycles of the Vancouver Island Marmot have just really tight margins. And so changes in weather patterns caused by human-induced climate change that affect snowmelt and spring plant growth could result in hibernation mortalities. And yet, humans, committed conservationists, zoologists, researchers, have helped pull the Vancouver Island Marmot back from extinction. In 2003, there were less than 30 marmot in the wild, with scientists observing that the population was so small that some reproductively mature marmots could not even find mates. Since then, though, regional and federal Canadian captive breeding programs at the Toronto Zoo, the Calgary Zoo, and at the Marmot Recovery Foundation on Vancouver Island have successfully released captive bred marmot back into the wild. And those marmot have mated with wild individuals to form new family groups and colonies. Nevertheless, the Vancouver Island Marmot has been considered critically endangered on the IUCN Red List since 2008, and their wild population is currently in decline. Most recent counts estimate that less than 250 Vancouver Island Marmot remain in the wild. Information for today's show about the Vancouver Island Marmot was compiled from the Canadian government's Species at Risk Assessments and Status Reports, Canada's National Observer's State of the Animal Special Report, the Marmot Recovery Foundation, Animal Diversity Web at the University of Michigan, the Canadian Journal of Zoology, Volume 74, Issue 4, and Volume 83, Issue 5, Canadian Field Naturalist, Volume 100, Issue 2, Mammalian Species, Issue 270, from Wikipedia, and from the IUCN. So now I would like to perform some music, an effort to open a space to reflect on the other lives with whom we share this earth. Just to clarify though, I don't want to suggest that this music is for the Vancouver Island Marmot. I don't want to think of the Vancouver Island Marmot as like a being without agency from whom I extract meaning. Instead, this music, I want it, and I want the time that we spend within it to be a space for contemplation and reflection, and in particular, the opportunity to feel both grief and awe. And so I will now create and sit in this space of sound and reflection, and I warmly invite you to join me. I honor the life force of the Vancouver Island Marmot. I will keep its human name in my record. I will celebrate the successes of its captive breeding programs. I am so grateful to have shared time on our planet with this amazing and super cute being. I lament the ways in which I and my species have harmed and diminished this species. And so, in the name of the Vancouver Island Marmot, I pledge to reduce my consumption and my carbon footprint and my wastefulness. I pledge to acknowledge and attempt to address the costs of my actions and my inactions. I pledge to resist the harm of any plant or animal kin or their habitat by individuals, corporations, and governments. I pledge my song to the witness and memory of all life, to a broad celebration of biodiversity, and to the total liberation of all beings. This has been Bad at Goodbyes. Thank you for listening. Until next time, let's take care of each other and all of our kin.